Before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to Vivo Sun. If you're looking for some quality products for an affordable price from a name that's been in the game for a very long time, head on over to vivosun.com. Use promo code PIGEONS420. Save yourself a few dollars, support the show, and get yourself some quality grow equipment. Thank you, Vivo Sun, and more about them throughout the show. Now, time for tea. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest this evening that I am very excited to talk to. We have Mr. Danny Danko. Mr. Danny Danko, thank you for joining us tonight, man. I very much appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, and I'm excited to be here.
Absolute pleasure. You've got a very long repertoire of experience in this field of the world of cannabis, and to me, this is a huge moment. I've seen your work, I've read your work, I've seen your podcast, and to be able to sit down, have a conversation, I'm really excited about it, man. So thank you for joining me tonight. I'm very excited.
Thanks for having me. I love the plant, so anything having to do with cannabis, I love to participate in.
I can appreciate that, man. I can appreciate that. So if anyone doesn't know, for anyone who's been underneath a rock, Danny Danko from Writing for High Times, you're an author yourself. You've been in the trunk of a car to get to grows for the photography. You've been in some secret gardens. You were in the industry before there was an industry. Tell me just a little bit about yourself, man.
Yeah, so I mean, long story short, I was born in Russia actually, and my family came over when I was very, very young, like 3 years old, in the 70s. And basically, I grew up between. At first, we lived in Houston, Texas, for a little while, and then moved to Boston, Massachusetts. So I tell people I grew up in Boston. I was there from like age 11 until I graduated college at BU in Boston, and during that time, got involved, with cannabis as a teenager. uh, Going to Boston Freedom Rally and just being involved, and then started growing right around that same time, around 17, 18 years old, just out of curiosity, and because a friend of mine had showed me a grow room that he had, a very small closet, and had like just a high quality cannabis at the time, which was hard to find. And when I moved to New York after college, that would have been like 95 or so. Um, then I started getting more heavily involved in growing and even some dealing of some cannabis, and got to know some people in the city. And at the time, High Times was in New York City, where a lot of the publishing was happening. So I got to know some people there, and I started playing for the softball team. And I worked for a hemp company called Headcase. We made hemp baseball hats in New Jersey, and we were like the only two companies on the East Coast that had anything at all to do with cannabis at all, at the time. And Normal was in Washington, D.C. So we did have a little bit of this kind of East Coast cannabis vibe going. But again, it was the 90s, and there was no legal cannabis. There was no medical marijuana. And it was still very dangerous. And people would tell you that it'll never be legal. I can't tell you how many times I heard that. And so little by little, I started working at High Times part-time, and then I started working there full-time around 2002. And basically just took it from there. I mean, I started writing. I wanted to do anything to get my foot in the door, basically, because I wanted to be in the cannabis biz, legitimately. And yeah, I just started answering the phone, breaking down boxes, doing whatever. And I was also kind of like the in-house uh, cannabis provider in some ways as well, along with a few others. And then, little by little, started writing, writing about cultivation and growing. My coworker, Kyle Cushman, moved to California, and I sort of took over his gig writing. And then in 2011, ended up writing a strain book, uh, the official High Times Field Guide to Marijuana Strains. And then in 2018, I wrote Cannabis, A Beginner's Guide to Growing Marijuana. And in between, sort of just wrote a lot of articles, visited a lot of grows, as you mentioned, traveled all around the world. We would do Amsterdam Cannabis Cup every year. I'd go to Northern California for harvest. I'd go to Vancouver and Barcelona, and pretty much all over the United States and Canada, visiting people's grows, big and small, hydro, soil, everything from, small grows to massive facilities. And I also started the Seed Bank Hall of Fame, and I wrote like the top 10 strains of the year and things like that. So that just kind of got me, involved in all of it, and politically, fighting for legalization, and supporting organizations like Freedom Grow and Last Prisoner Project and Normal and MPP, and just, getting involved and being more on the activism side of things as well. And got to see a lot of changes. A lot of things obviously are very different now than they used to be, for better and for worse in some cases, but certainly for better when it comes to people getting locked up and people getting arrested and separated from their families and having their pets murdered in front of them and things like that were just atrocities that happened due to prohibition. So we have come a long way. There's still so far to go and so many hoops to jump through, and but it's been an amazing ride. And again, like, not having to live with that fear that we had back then has made all the difference, because I mean, I used to grind my teeth when I slept, and it was just, it was a constant fear when you really love the plant and you know that you could get locked up for it at any moment. It was just scary. And I do want younger people to understand that, even with all the over taxation and over regulation and mids and corporations and all the stuff we have to deal with, that's one of the things we have to deal with a lot less these days. And I think it's important to remember.
Are you a home grower? Are you looking for some quality and affordable grow equipment? Well, Vivo Sun has got you covered. From tents to lights and full accessories, head on over to vivosun.com, use promo code PIGEONS420, or if you're on Amazon, promo code PIGEONSCOOP, save a few dollars and get yourself some great grow equipment. Save today, check out vivosun.com, and thank them for being a sponsor of today's tea.
You're absolutely right. And you know what? It's because of activism that you've continued to do and the work that you've done that guys like me can come into the internet and just kind of, I don't want to say it's a free ride, but it's certainly not what it used to be, because I've listened to you tell stories on other podcasts in regards to working at high times with the threat of the government busting through the door at any time, regardless of the fact that you're essentially protected by the First Amendment. You have the right to free speech, but the reality is that the government could come barging through that door at any moment. That had to be a little unnerving.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, luckily, at that time the company was owned by lawyers, so we did have a level of protection. But the government did come after us, and the government came after our advertisers even harder. So, there was something called Operation Green Merchant, where they came after the hydroponics industry. Then there was Operation Pipe Dreams, where they came after the glass and the pipe manufacturers. And, they were just flipping through the magazine, seeing what, who was advertising and who to go after, and really just trying to shut us down and really just infiltrate our movement in ways that were very insidious and harmful to that. And now I'm working for Champs trade shows, and we're dealing with the same sort of thing. The government is cracking down on hemp derived products and THCA products and farm bill exemptions, and it's a constant fight for our freedoms, which is strange, because we're supposed to be free to put whatever we want into our bodies and as adults, and it's not be treated like children by our government. And I think it's a shame, and that's not a partisan complaint. I think all government does that, and it's hypocritical for government to interfere into our living rooms, into our bedrooms, yep. Into our grow rooms. It really is. And I think real freedom means having the liberty to do what you want, as long as you're not harming anyone else.
You are absolutely correct. And I actually wrote a paper on this when I was graduating from university, how I believe that as citizens, we have the right through our Constitution to cannabis. I can argue that, you have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in America. I live in Canada, so it's the right to life, liberty, and security of person. But the reality is that you can funnel cannabis into each and every single one of those rights. However, we are still stifled. And do you have any reason? I don't want to get too far into it, but do you have any reason? Do you think you know why? Why is it still so frowned upon by the government? Is it money from exterior forces, influence, reluctance?
I think it's a little bit of everything, but I think that the reason, cannabis is singled out is because it opens your eyes and it makes you think and question your surroundings, question authority, in ways that alcohol does the opposite. It sort of makes for people more docile. It makes them kind of uh, less inclined to uh, ask those questions like, why does it have to be this way?
I
And
agree.
so I think cannabis and other, psychedelic medicines and things open our eyes. And I think that that doesn't behoove the government to have a population with their eyes open while they're trying to hoodwink us in different ways, large and small. So I think it's a threat to their authority. Ultimately, so, of course, the pharmaceutical companies are against it. Of course, the legal system is against it. Of course, the law enforcement and all that. Yes, those things are true. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's an eye opener and they want our eyes closed.
I couldn't agree more, and there's nothing I can add to that. I think you're totally right. Totally right. And not to mention, you've got firearms, alcohol, tobacco, like pharmaceuticals. These are the biggest industries in the world, and cannabis kind of goes against all of those in a way, right? And so, not I don't mean against, but it just would step on the profits of those industries slightly. So I get what I get what you're saying. So I wanted to kind of get into your experience at High Times because that in alone had to be amazing. I've read a number of articles of yours, and there are people that have told me, so I can't imagine how many people have told you that High Times was it and is the reason that they got into cannabis and are still into cannabis today. How does that feel to be a part of something so monumental, so pivotal in the industry or in the world of cannabis today?
It's amazing. It really is. And that's the oldest brand in cannabis. They should be celebrating their 50-year anniversary right now. They started in 1974. The problem is they've had some issues financially and as far as management and ownership goes. In 2017, they were bought by a group of investors, led primarily by one investor, and everything kind of started going downhill really from there. And to be honest, I'm really proud of the time that I spent there. But I had an amazing 15 years there, and then a pretty crappy 3 years towards the end there, from about 2017 to 2020, was really a trying time for me, for many of the original kind of employees and family that we became over the years. I would say from about 2000 to 2017 was like the golden age. It was just incredible. We had our own floor of a building in New York, where we could pretty much run rampant as long as we did what we had to do. A magazine still has to come out, books have to come out, calendars have to come out, all of that, all the work and the business has to happen. But aside from that, we had so much fun. I can't even begin to describe, like I mentioned, going to Amsterdam every year in November for Cannabis Cup. But then around 2010, we started doing, I think 2009 and 10, we started doing Cannabis Cups in the United States. And starting with San Francisco, and then Los Angeles, Denver, Colorado, Michigan. We did a bunch of great events all over the country. And those events really, I think, played a major role in changing people's minds, changing people's attitudes, and getting people involved in, the effort to change the laws and free the plant. Ultimately, it's about this plant that's healing, and it's a flower. All this talk about drugs and narcotics and things. Like, I don't even consider cannabis to fall into that category. To me, this is a healing flower. And it helps people. I can't tell you how many people I've met over the years, whether they were veterans or cancer survivors or people that had HIV and just all these, where they literally, with tears in their eyes, will tell me that cannabis saved their life and they would not be alive, whether it was post-traumatic stress or wasting syndrome or dealing with chemotherapy or just the stress of life, all these things. It's like it enhances our lives and it makes things feel and seem better for many, many, many people. And so even if it's just to make your day go by better or to watch a movie or whatever it might be, it's an enhancer in that way. And it might not be for everyone, I mean, obviously there's probably people who shouldn't consume cannabis if they're uh, schizophrenic or something along those lines. But there's so many people who have been helped, and so few that have had any kind of adverse effects that it's just a no-brainer. To me, it's like it's this amazing thing. So yeah, I mean, getting back to the High Times era, I mean, we had so much fun, but we did it with this cause in mind, and just seeing all the changes happen. It wasn't just High Times, obviously. There was so much else going on, and all the vendors and the companies that participated in the events and volunteers that helped us, and getting to meet my heroes over the years. I mean, Jack Herer and Dr. Lester Grinspoon, and all these people who I had read and admired and really looked up to, and then getting to meet them and hang out with them and consume cannabis with them was just the thrill of a lifetime. And so, if that's my legacy, or being part of that, then I'm super duper proud and super excited to talk about it, even with the bad times, the good times, and all of it, the high times.
Yeah, I love it. And you should be proud because it is an incredible journey, and the good and the bad. And I can't fathom to actually see the transition from illegal to legal in the way that you did. The way that you described doing the events from overseas to bringing them home, that must have been incredible to see your own people benefiting from what you were seeing overseas. Because it was almost like, because I'm going to be 40 soon. So it's like I do have a little taste of back when. And the thing is that there's like this perception that weed was legal, I'm going to use my quotations here, in Amsterdam, and that it was all about coffee shops and it was all about that experience, but it was so foreign here. We were so forbidden. So then to all of a sudden start seeing cups and events happening in San Diego and Michigan, that must have been amazing.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And it kind of creeps up on you. You don't see it happening in real time. It's just, okay, this happened and now this happened. But then now looking back, you can see that like the progression was insane, and like state by state, things changing, and then suddenly, okay, we're going to plant the flag in Denver. Now we're going to do Michigan. And there were some raids and we had some
Yeah.
unfortunate experiences there too. But that was the feeling. I mean, when I can remember going to Amsterdam in the 90s and having that feeling in a coffee shop, like, wow, I can order cannabis off of a menu and I can be treated like a
Wow.
customer instead of a criminal. And I can just sit here and, excuse me, roll a joint and watch the bikes go by and just have some breakfast and really have a great time. And to me, that feeling, I didn't want it to be only in one place. I want to bring that home. I live in New York City, so this is New Amsterdam. I wanted to make it New Amsterdam again, and so it was selfish in a way too, because I want that back home. I want to feel that. I want consumption lounges. I want dispensaries. I want coffee shops where I can chill and just be treated like a human being just like anyone else might want to go to a bar or go
For
to,
sure.
an auto race or whatever they're into. This is what I'm into, and so it's amazing even now, just for me walking around New York and smelling cannabis in the streets everywhere. And I work in a dispensary on Saturdays teaching home grow
Oh
classes
yeah.
at Conbud Yankee Stadium.
Wow.
So that's a blast. It's right by the baseball stadium in the Bronx, and people can walk in and legally buy a pre-roll, walk outside, light it up right in front of the police, and head into the ball game and enjoy America's
Good.
pastime, and it's all legal, and there's the police just standing there, the same ones that would have arrested us for the same thing just 4 or 5 years ago, and now they're protecting us, and I think it's very civilized and the way it should be, and it's what we always wanted. But of
Beautiful.
course, there's still a long way to go. Like I said, there's hoops to jump through, and overtaxing and overregulation, and all these people making laws about cannabis that don't consume cannabis and don't understand it. So certainly still a ways to go, but it is amazing to look back and see how far we've come, on the shoulders of the people who pushed those limits and boundaries, and risked their lives and livelihoods, for this. I mean, people lost transplants, when they were in line for an organ transplant and they test positive for cannabis, and that's a death sentence. This is a reality. It's not, it used to really piss me off when the media or politicians or whoever would talk about cannabis, and it was always just a munchy jokes, and oh, the you're gonna eat a bunch of Doritos, and it really annoyed me. All the headlines would always say, like, up in smoke, or da da da. It's always like a joke, but it wasn't a joke to me. When you're visiting friends that are locked up in jail, that's not a there's no joke there. It's no fun. And when people are, uh, harassed, and ultimately, like, in some cases murdered because they love this plant, it's not funny to me. You know what I mean? It's like, it's dead serious when people have a pet, like I said earlier, you have a dog that's protecting their home, from a completely unreasonable raid, and they get shot right in front of your kids. There's no joke there. That's a very, very, very serious situation. So it would piss me off sometimes, and even when people would tell me it'll never be legal, the government won't allow it, the cartels won't allow it, the pharmaceuticals won't allow it. It's such a self-defeating kind of prophecy from them, and that would piss me off too, because this is what we're fighting for, and if you're not fighting for it, then what are you doing? You know, in the future, all those atrocities that don't happen, it's impossible to measure, but think about, like, the raids that don't happen, the people that aren't getting locked up, the people are becoming millionaires now, at off of this plant, but there's still people locked up too. So we're in this weird transitionary period where we have to keep the pedal to the metal, keep the fight going until we're truly free.
You're 100% right. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the atrocities because they cannot be forgotten. It cannot be forgotten. Those names, those people, those stories, those families, they need to be remembered because it's so
Hmm.
outrageous and it's an atrocity that this happened to them. And we are essentially building on the backs of them. And I think it's very important that homage is paid and we understand the fight and the battle. One thing that, like, when I do you think that the federal government will legalize, or more importantly, should they? Like, in my opinion, the federal government shouldn't even have their hands in this issue. It shouldn't be. However, it is with the scheduling and the way that it's listed. Do you see the federal government shifting anytime soon?
I mean, I hope so. I mean, I truly hope so.
Fair.
I do think that something has to give, because, uh, on the federal side, that's where interstate trafficking can occur. You know what I mean? Right now, we're going state by state. In New York, everything we consume, technically, legally, has to be produced in New York. And I don't think that's fair. I think that we should be allowed to consume whatever is created out there, that we want. And so if it's from California, then so be it. But I think, we should have the right to grow our own, which we do, but we have plant limits, and it's pretty strict, 6 per person, 12 per household, and things like that, which I think is silly too. I've never understood why how they could make an ounce legal, but a pound is illegal. It's like, where do they think an ounce comes from?
Right,
You know
right.
what I mean? But, but everything is all baby steps. It's always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and that's just kind of how glacial, change happens. I will never forget. For me, it was reading a book called Shattered Lives, which was by, uh, Chris Conrad, and Mickey Norris, and it was all just stories of people who had their lives destroyed by prohibition. That and The Emperor Wears No Clothes by Jack. We called that the Hemperor. Those books turned me from basically just like a cannabis user to a cannabis lifer, someone who just could not sit back and allow this prohibition to continue to exist in the way that it did back then and in the way that it still does to a certain extent. So I do think that there needs to be a federal change made just as far as the scheduling should be. I mean, cannabis does not belong on any schedule at all. Schedule 3 is there with a lot of very harmful things. And alcohol's not on a schedule, tobacco's not on a schedule. And I would say cannabis is far safer than alcohol and tobacco. And I think it's pretty obvious to anyone, even people who don't consume. So to me, it should just be descheduled. It should be treated basically like tea, in my opinion. It's like, okay, kids aren't supposed to really be drinking tea because of the caffeine or whatever, but the reality is they might, and it's not going to kill them. And so to me, it should be basically along those lines, something uh, you know that like tomatoes.
I totally
Right? I
agree.
mean,
I totally agree with you. Like I've always said that it's like a vitamin, like a vitamin. If like I know,
right.
like it's a super vitamin in my opinion. There's no different. It shouldn't be behind a counter. It should be accessible. It should be available, and that's it. It should not be on the schedule list at all. And I don't like the conversation of rescheduling when people get excited about it. This is wool over our eyes for us to argue about something that shouldn't even be argued about.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it's hard because, like I said, these things happen incrementally. So,
Sure.
will the government deschedule? Probably not. Will they move it to Schedule 3? Probably. And is that a good thing? Ultimately, it's better than Schedule 1, right? I mean, it sucks and it's not what we want, but it is a step in that direction in the same way that medical marijuana. And I think what I loved about the medical marijuana situation was that's getting the wounded off the battlefield.
Mhm.
Basically, it's like, all right, you're going to call this a war on us, a war on cannabis. All right, fine, then it's a war. Now we're on opposite sides of a war, but can we just remove the wounded from the battlefield? So to me, that's kind of like the medical side of things. Okay, these are people who clearly benefit from cannabis. Let's create a loophole for them so that they can use medicinally, and then we'll worry about adult use and what they call recreational use, which I call just adult use. Uh, and so there are battles, and then there's the war. And so I do think the scheduling thing, as much as I don't want it to see it at Schedule 3, I'd prefer to see it off the schedule altogether. It's still a step in the right direction, which is descheduling. So I'm not anti that, in the way that some people are like all or nothing. In politics, you take what you can get. It's the art of, you know, compromise in some ways. The older I get, the more I understand that that's just kind of the way it is, and it sucks, but it's something to deal with. And so, at the same time, uh, the state by state thing has made tremendous progress, and now because of that, the whole world is changing their thoughts because we were the ones, driving this war, even in other countries. We wouldn't have deals with the EU unless they crack down on cannabis, and so now they can loosen as well. And so I think it is important. I mean, what we've seen in Thailand is just mind blowing. They went from like death penalty for cannabis to fully legal overnight almost, and that
And there's
to
weed
me is
everywhere, everywhere in
yeah,
Thailand,
yeah, yeah,
and it should be.
yeah, and there should be, and traditionally they've had that before, but they crack down because we forced them to crack down, and now that we're not doing that, they can actually benefit and loosen that up and actually have tourism and a whole industry making millions of dollars there. And so, like I said, we've come a long way. I do think, it's important to remember the past, but also to move forward and to keep things progressing.
I agree with you. I get a lot of flack because I'm from Canada and I spend a lot of time paying attention to American politics. And the same answer I give every time is the reality is America is a power player. And when she dances, the world watches. And it's no lie. It's a fact that America is responsible for the prohibition of cannabis on an international stage. And it is only that way because of America. And so if America flinches and starts to go towards legalization, of course the world will do it as well. I argue the only reason Canada went legal is because you had Oregon, Washington, California, you had all of these states that were legal, and we kind of looked at them and were like, all right, okay. You know, there's a lot more politics involved in it, obviously, but it's because there was movement. So that's why I pay attention so close to American politics, because I want to see what happens. We kind of have a direct um, impact on the decisions she makes. So yes, I agree with you. Any movement is good movement.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's not always, you don't always get what you want,
No, that's
but
fair.
you keep things moving, and over time things clearly change. Because like I said, in the last 30 years, that I've been a part of, almost 30 years in the cannabis space, they want to call it, uh, there's been a tremendous amount of change, and like where there were just a few brands and a few people willing to put their head up above
Right.
the surface. Now it's wide open and people are making tons of money, and there's all kinds of stuff happening, and some things that I'm not always super psyched on either, like spray packs and things like that. And but again, we're all adults, and people can, as long as people are informed about what they're doing, they're allowed to do it. So that's been one of the interesting things about working for Champs trade shows too, is that you know, it's about more than just cannabis. I mean, I'm there to help with the cultivation side. We have Luna now, Luna Stour, working on the mycology side. But basically, anything that people want to put in their bodies on their own is part of it, and that's what we're all about. It's about freedom, and it's about choice, and having that freedom of choice that we should have as adults.
That's fair. And I agree. It starts with compromise. It starts with compromise, one little bit at a time. Danny, you got to talk to me about what it was like to be in the 90s going through gardens that are top secret. You were hidden in trunks, blindfolded so people wouldn't know your location. What was it like to tour a garden like that? Because today is much different. I don't know if there's
Yeah.
too many places like that in America. There are.
No, yeah, no, it's wild. And yeah, like you said, I had to do a lot of that stuff, but I was happy to do it because honestly, like, I don't want to know where the place was. Like, I didn't, I don't, if anything should happen down the road, I wanted that plausible deniability that, hey, I don't even know where that was. And like I said, we were run by lawyers, so they were pretty adamant about, like, safety, first, be smart, and things like that. But yeah, I got to see a lot of that stuff, and I had to learn how to take pictures too, because a lot of times the growers don't want me to bring a photographer into their space as well. They barely wanted me coming, so I had to learn a bunch of skills on the fly too, because shooting grow rooms under high pressure sodium lighting and white balancing and all of that, if you come back without the pictures, you really don't have the story. And so I really had to learn a lot of things on the fly, and going to see those gardens where you had to basically convince people to even allow you to see them, what's in it for them, kind of thing. To now, I mean, I visited a garden in Hawaii a couple of years back where I had to get an FBI background check. Like, I literally, anyone visiting a garden in Hawaii has to go through a background check with fingerprints and everything. So I went from, like, clandestinely, like, hopping in the trunk of a car to visit a garden, to actually applying with the FBI for permission to visit a garden. So it's wild to think how much that changed, and the size of the gardens. My God, I mean, in the 90s, 8 or 16 lights was like a huge grow. And now, I've seen 1,000 light grows, and even bigger ones in some cases. In Canada, I saw almost a million acre, 800,000 square foot facility at one point, where we flew over it in a helicopter to see the whole thing. So the size of the facilities has grown, but one thing I have learned, though, is that the best grows are not those those massive 800 square foot facilities. The best ones are the 5 by 5 tents and the smaller grows where the grower can actually pay attention to each plant and really put the effort and love into each
So
individual
some
plant.
things haven't changed.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the quality is always better in the smaller grows. That's one thing I haven't that I haven't seen uh, scale up, in that way where these huge facilities can grow the highest quality. So it's interesting, and I like to tell people too, like even if you're limited in plant numbers, typically you're not limited in plant sizes. So those 6 plants could be each one of those plants could be vegged out for a longer period of time and yield a lot more than expected. So uh, you're limited in the amount of plants, but not the size of the plants. So just bigger containers, longer veg times, and bigger plants.
Play the game, man. Play the game. That's what it's about. I really like how you said the limits the plants, the plant count, not the plant size. That's very important. Like, 'cause we can get some pretty massive canopies. Are you still growing today?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's legal in New York. Like I said, 6 plants per person, 12 per household. So I don't have to fear. I have a roof deck, actually right above where I'm where I'm sitting now, where I put some plant. I really truly think this plant. I mean, I don't even. I think a lot of people would agree. A plant wants to grow in full sun. Uh, the whole idea of growing it indoors is because of prohibition. So without that, let's take advantage of the great big grow light in the sky, and just let the plant thrive. I think that the terp profiles you get from sunshine can't really be duplicated indoors. Obviously, indoors has its pros and cons, and there's incredible indoor cannabis, of course. I'm not naive to that, but I do think ultimately the plant wants to grow in sunshine. I think the ultimate solution is a greenhouse, and you could grow year round in a greenhouse if you have light deprivation and light supplementation, and you can heat the greenhouse if you're in colder areas like Canada. I've seen tropical plants growing in greenhouses in Maine with snow on the ground outside. As long as you can keep them warm and lit, you can grow plants year round and take advantage of sunshine when you've got it, and lights when you need them, and heaters if necessary. But man, it's there's nothing like your own personal homegrown, and people who grow their own understand that feeling of like that consuming the product that you created is there's nothing like it.
You're absolutely right. And the same thing, I've traveled across my country and a little bit across America, and it, it stands to say the same that home grow dominates. It's just that passion, it's that desire for quality that really stands true in the home grower, that even though I think may stand true to anyone who's on a bigger scale, it's just quality control is so difficult. All it takes is even just a patch of dead air in a big facility and you've got subpar results. It doesn't take a genius to grow good cannabis, but it's not easy to grow good cannabis. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And what sets it apart too, it's the care taken past harvest too. I mean, it's the drying process, the curing process, storage process. And when you grow in bulk, you just don't, the flushing the plants towards the end, just whether they're organic or hydro or whatever it might be, you still just want to clean burn. You want that white ash. You want a good experience. I want to taste, I smoke joints for the most part, so I want to taste it even halfway through. I don't want it to just be smoke and harsh and have to keep relighting a joint. So, I do think overfeeding runs rampant in most cannabis facilities. I think most plants are overfed, and you'll see even in high times pictures, the burnt leaf tips and things. The plant's not dead. It looks beautiful, but it's overfed. And I believe lighter feeding is important for quality purposes, flushing, drying, and curing. And those are things that don't seem to happen in larger facilities and grows that are massive. And it's one thing if you're doing that for biomass and you're going to produce gummies or uh, uh, distillate or something, but the true flower connoisseurs that like to smoke uh, they just want the highest quality, and I think you get that with homegrown.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I'm glad that you had the opportunity to go into some of these like secret underground gardens to get that information, because it's that information that you essentially wrote about that got into the hands of home growers that would fuel their passion to start doing this, to start doing this. It's like you said that, cannabis has saved a lot of people. And I have a T-shirt on my shop that says "Music raised me, cannabis saved me," because
Mm.
the reality is that I grew up without much of a role model or male figure in my life, so I had to resort to music to kind of find that guidance. And naturally, I had a lot of behavioral issues because nobody was. Now I can point fingers, but not having a good, solid male role model in my life is pretty much the main attributor to that. But cannabis allowed me to like be retrospective, to kind of take a look at who I am, what I'm doing, slow down. Suffered from ADHD, and just being able to think outside the box, to be able to slow down and focus. I attribute a lot of my successes today to the fact that cannabis has allowed me to be the best version of myself, whether it's a father, whether it's a man, whether it's a citizen, a volunteer, and I'm eternally thankful for that. So I feel like with half the amount of experience as yourself, I feel like a passion inside me to share this message with as many people as possible. I don't know about yourself, but it's like I'm not interested in arguing with somebody. If someone's dead set about cannabis being the devil's lettuce, and I don't really want to waste my time in trying to argue with them. I much rather open the eyes of someone who's struggling with sleep, struggling with an ailment, that doesn't know about weed as an option. That's far more productive in my books. And that's something I want to focus on way more than arguing with someone who doesn't get it. Because I'm sure you're on Twitter. I'm sure you see all of the nonsense that is out there about just the rhetoric about weed.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I try not to even entertain it, you know what I mean? Because it just amplifies their message in some ways where
You're right.
I think, getting engaged in that, even getting engaged in that argument, justifies their argument. And I think ultimately we're right and they're wrong. And I'm not going to just waste time trying to convince them. Like you said, it's like, it's obvious. I mean, compare that, what you just described about being a better person and being more introspective. Compare that with someone if they were choosing to use alcohol instead of cannabis, and what the difference is, and generationally what that means to them as a father, as a parent. Like I said, as a child of someone would you rather be a child of an alcoholic or a cannabis user? Would you rather? I mean, it just there's no argument.
You're right.
There's no discussion. So to me, it's fairly obvious, um and yeah, I try, and whenever I see stuff like that, my first instinct is I want to reply to this and say that, da da da, and then I'm like, you know what? Ignoring it is probably ultimately better, at least from my perspective, than engaging in it, because it dies in ignorance, like not ignorance, but ignoring it
You're
rather
right.
than amplifying.
I th-
Yeah, I don't know. It's like that for me with a lot of political stuff. I'm just like, you know what? I can't just even having this discussion uh is beneath me. You
I
know
get
what I
it.
mean?
I
Like,
get it.
it's the same if somebody tells me that the earth is flat, I'm like, I can't
I'm
really
not
even
having this
talk to you.
conversation.
Yeah, I'm not even having the conversation. I'm not arguing that the earth is round, and that's not something I'm going to do. It's so patently obvious that it's not something I even want to waste breath involved in. And so it's the same with the prohibitionists. They're wrong, we're right, and I don't want to even engage with them in an argument because they're wrong and we're right,
That's
and
it.
it's obvious.
It's obvious. It is obvious.
you
That's
know,
that's the
and
truth.
and the other side is, you know, we're having fun. Our parties are a lot funner than their parties. Believe me, I've done the research. and we're having a lot more fun than they are.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No, and that's a great way to go about it. You can't argue with stupid is kind of how it goes. The reality is like, then I think you're stupid. You know, it's like, if you're going to argue with it, then what are you doing? And I like that you said that I'm not even going to entertain it. No, that's good, because we're right and you're wrong, and it's obvious. The science is out there, and it's overwhelming, and it's refreshing to see too that more and more studies are reiterating what we've known to be true the whole time. So it's like when another story comes out and it's like, it turns out that, you know, it is cancer. There are properties of cannabis that can be effective against treating forms of cancer and its negative repercussions. It's like, we knew this a long time ago, you know, and I think that's important. One thing I kind of want to ask you too is, like, I'm a father. Do you have kids?
I do.
You do.
I have a 14-year-old son. Yeah.
Oh, okay. We have the same age. My boy's gonna be 14 tomorrow.
Oh,
And have you ever struggled with incorporating the lifestyle of cannabis with family?
yeah, yes, over the years, absolutely. I mean, for years, I wouldn't really even discuss it because, you know, they can take your child away in those days, and it was really, you know, an issue. Now, luckily, you know, it's legal and where I am, and I don't have to worry so much about that. But yes, it's always difficult. I mean, especially for parents, it's like, you know, uh, how how do you talk to your kids about it? How do you, especially if you're known for it, you know what I mean? It's not something you can hide. So yeah, over the years it's been a struggle, but I think honesty is the best policy. I think it's important. Uh, Kids aren't stupid. They know, they see things that we don't, you know, necessarily know that they see, and you can't be a hypocrite and you know, say one thing and do another, or act one way and in front of your kids and in a different way elsewhere. So, you know, I think ultimately it's just, you got to be honest, and I'm not, there's no shame. I'm not, you know, I don't feel shame about it. The only thing was the fear that something might happen, and then in the absence of that fear, people really shouldn't be ashamed at all. I mean, I tell people all the time, don't let anyone shame you for cannabis use. You know, it's silly, and you know, ultimately this has larger repercussions throughout the world. I mean, just us shifting closer to living soil, I think, for growing is going to hopefully cause a shift in food production to living soil, and our produce, our vegetables and our fruits should all be produced with living soil instead of in these factory farms that have this tremendous amount of blowback, you know, and are harmful to the environment. We can improve the soil. We can improve it year after year and use less and less inputs. And that's not just for cannabis. That has global repercussions to saving the planet. So, you know, it's bigger than just the plant. It's like a whole, you know, it's a whole ethos, you know, of sustainability and higher quality produce and products in our bodies.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that honesty is the best policy. There's always stories about children getting access to cannabis, or having access, or consumption going up with legalization and amongst children. And you know, perhaps this is a legitimate concern. And I think it would be foolish for us to just brush over it and think, everything's fine. But the thing is that I put the onus on the parents every single time, that it is not up to the government, it's not up to shop owners, it's up to parents to teach their children right and wrong. And for me, you know, I've always taught my son that there are adult things and there's kid things. There's adult drinks, there's kid drinks. There's adult movies, there's kid movies. There's adult foods, and the same thing goes when there's weed in the house. This is just dad's medication. This is adult stuff, and you know, it's best if children don't use it, particularly if they don't smoke it while they're young, because I think the science is kind of I don't know, sufficient to suggest that if adolescents smoke weed, it can be damaging to the neurons in the brain. I think that's fair, but I don't think it's a good argument to say that children shouldn't have access to cannabis, because there's plenty of examples of children with epilepsy or severe, what the heck, or severe whatever it is, nausea, recovering from chemo, so on and so forth. Kids can benefit from cannabis, and I think it's important that you said honesty is the best policy, but it's up to parents to teach our kids that there's a time and a place, and I feel like that gets ignored more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, lying to them is just going to push them away and push them into harder things. And that's what they talk about, this gateway drug theory. It's so ridiculous because you could say the same thing about sugar or anything else, and sugar is more harmful to kids than cannabis, in my opinion. Uh, and that whole idea that, they're, if you lied to them about cannabis, then sure, they're going to think that you're lying about fentanyl or cocaine or pharmaceuticals or anything else. So if you're honest to that with them and you make that separation, which I think, I learned in Holland that, they have soft drugs and hard drugs, and they have that separation. And I think that's an important separation to make. And what's funny is Dutch kids, they don't even think smoking cannabis is cool at all. Like that's what tourists and old people do. So they're, it's a whole different kind of vibe to them. And I think, we could benefit from that as well. It's like making it clandestine and illegal actually maybe kind of, I'm far more worried. Like I said, I have a 14-year-old. I'm far more worried about vaping, about fentanyl, about all the other stuff that he's exposed to out
Pop.
there in the world. Yeah, I mean, it's just insane what kids are exposed to, and cannabis is ultimately the
The
least of my worries in that regard. So, it's hypocritical to lump it in with all these other things because it's just so different that doesn't belong in that category.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Much worse things to worry about. When we're at a restaurant, like my kid does, like we don't really allow pop in our house too much, like soda. And when we go to a restaurant, it's like free refills. Like the waitress will just come over and be like, "You want pop? You want more? You want more?" It's like we'll give them one. We're like, "Hey, you can have one Sprite or something," and then they're like, "Refill, refill." It's like, no, no, don't do that. How were your parents? You said you consumed early? How were your
Yeah,
parents with it?
they were not happy. I mean, again, they were from the Soviet Union, where
That's fair.
marijuana could have been the same as heroin. They could not even tell the difference. And if it's illegal, it's bad, and if it's bad, it's illegal, and that's that. There was no discussions, and yeah, I mean, I was basically kicked out of the house at like 17, 18 years old, based not kicked out, but asked kindly to get out and leave
Oh wow.
and live on my own, and I did. I mean, it wasn't, I could always go home, and it wasn't like I was estranged from my family, but they did not want cannabis in the house. They did not want scales in the house. They certainly didn't want plants growing in the house. So, I was on my own. But again, I also never asked them for money or, or anything after that either. And ultimately now my mother's still alive. She's in her mid 80s now, and she uses cannabis to help her sleep.
Of
And
course.
yeah, and we've smoked together, and she finds it, kind of silly that it was ever even a big deal. Which is ultimately what you find out when people who are anti something happens in their lives, someone in their life gets cancer, or they get older and they using cannabis for arthritis, whatever it might be. Suddenly their minds change, but it has to affect them personally for that change to happen. And I think one of the great things about it being legal is that block that they've had. Okay, it's illegal. I'm not doing it. Is gone, and now that the stigma that they would have felt isn't there as strongly as it would be, and they're more likely to use it to benefit themselves. And I think that ultimately is a great thing.
I totally agree. We same thing in our family. My father and mother-in-law were the exact same. Hard against it, not necessarily hard against it per se, but just not in favor of it. The moment Canada went legal in 2018, it was just like all of a sudden, phew, the blindfold was off, and it was like, there it is. Okay, I'm all about it. It is now legal, and it was just, I can't blame anyone for that. because you're putting way too much at risk for something that you know nothing about. If they didn't use it and it was just this idea, this notion, I can't blame anyone for that. And it angers me that so many people are held back by just the law, and you can't fault them for it.
Yeah, no, that stigma is real, and it really, I mean, there were people who didn't want, parents of friends that wouldn't let their friends hang out with me, or didn't want me in the wedding, or all different ways that you could feel that stigma, and that thing is real, and it's fading, but it's still
It's
there. So people still have that idea that somehow we're dirtbags because we smoke pot and we're doing dope, and all these kind of notions that they have about it. And that's why I try, as a writer, I have to use all the words. So I'll say marijuana, I'll say weed, I'll say whatever. I don't like to say dope because to me that dope is something different.
right.
And it's the old timers. That's an old timer word like grass, or but but I do think reshifting the frame, and using words like cannabis, and um, teaching people about the endocannabinoid system. Most people don't even know that, like, there's receptors in your body for this. It's not like what I mean. There's a reason we love it, and our bodies need it, and it's in breast milk. And people's minds are blown when you tell them that. And then I'm like, no, don't believe me, and it's not a conspiracy. Look it up. Look it up for yourself. I'm not trying to convince you, but like, Google it.
And
Google endocannabinoid
what's
system.
crazy to me, and you
There's
mentioned
no,
that,
there's nothing like that for alcohol. There's nothing like that
no,
for any
no,
of those other things.
no.
There's no receptors in our body for
And to
that.
think for the last 100 years, humans have had almost no access to cannabinoids in a way that, civilization has been utilizing cannabinoids for millennia, and we stopped it hardcore, like a tolerance break in the 1930s, and we've been on a 100-year tolerance break. And it's like, I honestly feel like we depleted ourselves. No wonder we are highly stressed, we're overworked, we're anxious, we're nervous as a as a human race. It's like, I honestly feel like we eliminated one of the key elements of making those feelings dissipate and go away, and how to deal with them. So for 100 years, it's crazy. It's crazy to think that yeah, we haven't had our endocannabinoid system tapped into in a way that it was, in my opinion, designed to do what it was designed to do. That's incredible.
Look at the things that have run rampant in the 100 years. I mean, obesity levels,
Hmm.
addiction levels
Hmm.
to things, overdoses, suicides. I implore people, if you have anyone in your life who's suffering from any addiction, alcohol, dependency on opiates, whatever it might be, or they're feeling suicidal, depression, ADHD, as you mentioned, all these things, try cannabis before you give up, try it. Give it a shot, because like I said, many people I've met, it's saved their life. They wouldn't be here without it. And whether that was veterans or seniors or kids that had epilepsy, like you mentioned, people going through chemo that can't eat and hold down food, uh, cannabis is a lifesaver in some cases. So before you give up, give it a try, and implore your friend or family member or whoever your loved one is who is suffering to try it, because it can help, and it might help, and it's worth a shot.
Oh, very well said. Very well said. What are some of your favorite strains of today?
Wow. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of strains that are popular that are these days that are kind of on the candy side of things. And I like those strains too. I mean, obviously there's lemon cherry gelato, very popular. Um, I just think, I like a variety of flavors, and I tend to prefer sort of the gassy fuel kind of strains, in particular, the sours and the kushes and the chems and things. But some of my favorite strains are sativa dominant strains like strawberry cough and super lemon haze. So it's really kind of situational, Daytime I like the sativas, nighttime I like the indicas. Even that whole sativa indica thing is it's a little bit of a I don't say it's like a falsehood, but it's an oversimplification of a much more complicated sort of thing with all the different terpene profiles and flavonoids and cannabinoids and all that. But there is certainly something to it. There's um, strains that are more enjoyable during the day and more energetic and sort of insightful. And for me, like those are great for inspiration. And then when I want to relax and just chill, and then I go for the gassier ones. But then let me see. I mean, Trop cookies is so
Oh
popular. I mean,
yes.
I was in Spain, in Barcelona, judging the Organic Cup, and it seemed like you know, probably 80% of the strains that were entered were some type of trop cookies or lemon cherry gelato kind of flavors. And they stand out because that candy, sort of sweet, Skittles kind of uh, scent is strong and loud. But some of my favorite strains are not super loud or even all that pretty, like Nigerian silk and some of the African sativa dominant hybrids, Durban poison and Nigerian and Congolese. They're not pretty and they're pretty wispy, and growers hate growing them because they take forever to flower and they don't weigh much. But man, the effect is just like almost psychedelic and completely electric in some cases. Um, and the older I get, the more I can appreciate that.
I, you and I have a very similar palette. It must be amazing to be in your shoes where it's like you've seen the evolution of genetics. It's kind of like built on the backs of some of all these originals. You would have like taken pictures of the Congolese or taken pictures of the haze and then seen today the mixtures, the cookies, the GMOs, the gelato, all these crosses that have just come so far. That's got to be incredible to just see the evolution of that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the building blocks are and the foundation happened, centuries ago with the land races and inbred lines from all these regions. The plant basically adapts to wherever you bring it. So if you bring it to the equator, it's going to adapt. If you bring it to the mountains, it's going to adapt. And all those adaptations change the terp profile, the flavor, the flowering time, the leaf size, and all of that. So even the book that I wrote in 2011, the Field Guide to Marijuana Strains, like it's dated now, and that's less than 15 years ago. But those are like the building blocks of the polyhybrids that we're smoking now. But there was an issue, of course, of bottleneck genetics for a while because of prohibition and because there were certain people who were pioneers like Soma and Skunkman Sam and Neville and people who had brought the genetics to Amsterdam to basically preserve what was left, and then there was sort of a movement to sort of get out there and find those land races. So people started traveling and going to Africa and India and trying to get the seeds from those original places. And sadly, some of those places are war torn now. Um, some of the traditional hash producing regions like Afghanistan and the Middle East in general and North Africa. Those are places where people have been making hash for thousands of years. And they've been growing those plants specifically for that purpose and choosing over millennia all those, the plants with the most gland heads and the most flavorful for them to make the hash out of. And then in Southeast Asia, people were choosing for different purposes, for teas and things. And that's why you would wind up with things that were a bit more wispy, but more about the effect, like Southeast Asian, like I said, the Highland Thai and Lowland Thai and Vietnamese strains tend to also herm out a little more, than the indicas, but at the same time provide different nuances and flavors and profiles. So yeah, it's been amazing, and I think there's still a long way to go. Every time you pop a seed, there's that opportunity to find something new, particularly with regular seeds, a little less so with feminized or autos and things. But um, there's still stuff out there, still things to discover, and that's exciting that we're just scratching the surface of what this plant can do.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I totally agree with you that I think this is, although I think this is still the beginning. I still think we are still so early on finding the greatest one. As a home grower myself, I'm on that journey to find that great smoke. And I haven't found, like, I found a lot of great smokes, but that journey continues. And I think you're right. We're at a very
Hmm.
infant stage of breeding, because although there's way more breeders than there were yesteryear, there are still so many more breeders to come in regards to breeding good genetics.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
go
those
ahead.
those new things, the new things that you want to find are things that are crosses of two things that are very different from each other. And this is how I learned that, nature promotes diversity, is that those things come from two things that are not the same but different, and so something new can be achieved. And I think that's an important thing to understand, whether you're breeding with plants or people or fruits or vegetables or anything else. There are new things out there, but they are the result of different things crossing, and yeah, just keep
Opposites
on popping
attract.
seeds.
Opposites
I mean,
attract.
the fact that we have this plant where, from one region it could suppress your appetite, and from another region it could increase your appetite. It's like a dream for a pharmaceutical company to discover something like that, and yet they've been holding it back for so long. So, well, once they get a hold of it too, like, the science, I'm not always completely opposed to the scientists getting involved and working with it, because there are plenty of things to discover, and we do need to find those things. And like Dr. Lester Grinspoon said, one day, the prohibition will be looked at as a complete folly, and just one of the biggest mistakes of the 20th century. And at the same time, cannabis will be viewed as almost like penicillin, when it comes to the miraculous effects that you can get from this one thing that can really save humanity. Hopefully, I mean, we speak about it in such lofty terms, but it's actually true. Like, hemp and cannabis can save the world if we let it.
If without even getting into how incremental or how crucial hemp was to society or to the world pre, the 1900s, and then to think about how we've depleted ourselves in regards to our endocannabinoid system. I think when we talk about being, or when we think lofty and talk about saving the world, I think it's a legitimate argument. I think it's a legitimate conversation that we have deprived ourselves of something with such incredible healing power for so long, that we are going to change our makeup when we start to use it in a way that utilizes the best parts of our makeup, of our human makeup. So I think it sure sounds lofty, but I think it's a very valid argument, to be honest. Um,
Yeah,
you have your own podcast too. I wanted to touch on that for a minute. The Grow Your Own Bud. Yes,
yeah. Grow bud yourself. Yeah,
Grow
yeah.
Bud Yourself. Sorry,
Grow bud yourself. I used to be called Free Weed when I started in
that's
in
right.
2011. I started a podcast when I was at High Times called Free Weed from Danny Danko, and then I did have to change the name after parting ways with the magazine, but I changed the name to Grow Bud Yourself. I love the name Free Weed, but it's the same idea. It's like, hey, you can create this thing out of thin air. I call it modern day alchemy. You can take seeds and water and light and food and uh, create this amazing medicine, and feed your soul and your endocannabinoid system. And so the best way is to grow it yourself, in my opinion, or get it supplied by someone who is growing it themselves and living soil and things like that. So yeah, I just try to encourage people. It's been on hiatus for a few months, to be honest. Since I started the gig at Champs, I've been pretty busy, and I lost my location where I was filming. I started filming and doing live video podcasts, and sadly, the location closed. So I'm looking for, sponsors, looking for a venue where, a smoke-friendly venue where we can
Yes.
interview people, and hopefully bring it out of hiatus and bring it back. But yes, I mean, I'm proud of it. We've done over 120 something episodes of Grow Bud Yourself. We had about 7 or 8 of the Free Weed Show, and I mean, I interviewed Lester Grinspoon. I had many people who we've lost since, Subcool, the breeder,
Rest in peace.
a lot of amazing people were on the show telling their stories, giving their grow tips and secrets, and so I'm proud of it. It's a legacy of a lot of amazing, like I said, just talks and interviews and conversations that I've had with people, growers, breeders, people on the political side, activists, but really just focusing on the plant and everything that it's able to give us. Ultimately, there's a lot of people who kind of use the plant to promote themselves, and I kind of just want to promote the plant. And if that helps, then that's great. But it's not about me or anyone, Jack or Lester. Who it's just about the plant, and we're all basically just giving back to the plant what it's given to us. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing to me is just uh, promoting this healing flower.
You know what? And I think that's why people like Jack, people like yourself, people like Mr. Watson, Skunkman Sam, the reason they stand out is because their selflessness, their desire to push the plant no matter what. And that stands true ahead of anything else. And I thank you. I thank you because it's people like yourself, as I said at the top of the show, that allowed a path for me to follow almost seamlessly. Of course, it's not. We still deal with the suppressions of high media and the suppressions of just simply our message, but not. I almost fear zero prosecution, fear of prosecution, which is amazing, which is allows me to create in a way that I feel that people were not able to do because of that fear. It consumed them. So now I get to be a creative. I get to do what so many others could not, and it's because of people like yourself. So thank you, Danny. Appreciate it. If you don't
I
hear it, you
appreciate that.
certainly deserve it. I appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate that too. And it's sad to see what companies like YouTube and Instagram are doing to content creators like you guys, just really holding you back and discriminating against you for something that's illegal. And you're doing it out of Canada where it's legal, and yet still they're suppressing that information because it's fearsome. They're afraid of this plant. It was just so silly, and it would be amusing if it was like a made up story, but it's real, and it's crazy to think that like they're really holding it back for because they're afraid of a plant.
Somebody is now. Of course, it's hard for me to even to discuss it because it doesn't feel like it's a as pressing issue as what people have really gone through for this plant. But the reality is they've just now shifted the way of prosecution to affecting your wallet, affecting your career, your reputation. They just find other ways of prosecuting you is kind of how I feel now, rather than just throwing you in a jail and or the myriad of other ways that they used to do it. It's just another way. But I think it's important to adapt, overcome, and use these platforms. It's their playground, man. It's their house, right? So the reality is that I'm here because they've allowed me to be here, and yet I'm in their living room screaming about weed, and they still let me be here. So that's the bright light, is that I'm in their square and I'm screaming, and I will continue to scream my message for as many people to hear me. And you just use it to your advantage. If anybody wanted to follow you, Danny, if anybody wanted to reach you, get in touch with you, where could they do that?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter or X, whatever, Danny Danko, everywhere. Facebook, Instagram is Danny Danko HT, because I had to change it at one point. I lost the original Danny Danko one, and like everyone else has been through,
Damn it.
being shadow banned, being deleted, and all of that. But yeah, I'm out there. I'm on LinkedIn if anyone's interested. I'm also with Champs Trade Shows, and we have shows coming up in Atlantic City and Chicago, our big summer show in Las Vegas. And again, there's going to be cultivation sections, mycology, we've got seed companies, nutrient brands, lighting, we've got it all. Um, And yeah, I'm just excited to be out here, promoting cannabis, promoting champs, and keeping the dream alive and keeping the fight going, so that future generations don't have to deal with what we dealt with, and also understand, um, you know, where we've come from and where we're going.
Dude,
That's why it's great to have people like you guys, you and everyone that's younger coming up and doing the same thing, and pushing hard, and in ways, and reaching people on platforms that we don't even know about, which is
you're
great.
right. Yeah. Hey, you know what? I can appreciate the appreciation, and it, it's incredible. You're so many years into this, and I look to you as a role model in regards to I'm 5 years into this is my job. This has become a career for me. The plant has afforded me the ability to provide for my family in a way that I never experienced before. And it is a blessing and a dream to be able to call this mission a job and a lifestyle. So it's a blessing. It's a blessing. And I can't imagine how it feels for you to be doing this for so long, man. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your story with me, Danny. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Many
Thanks so much for
blessings.
having
Absolutely.
me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Danny, and all your journeys. I wish you nothing but success and blessings, and I can't wait till we get to smoke a joint in person.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Thanks so
Danny.
much.
Take care, my man. Peace.